This week we'll be in our third week of the family vacation series. Family vacations are usually a lot of fun. You know, it's that time that we spend time with our kids, our parents, our relatives on purpose. You know, we try to do things for fun and be like, let's do these things and those things. And sometimes people have different ideas of vacation. Maybe you might understand, maybe your spouse or your parents or other loved ones, their idea of vacation is going and seeing everything possible to see in that city or wherever you're going. Maybe your idea of vacation is going to a beach house, sitting on the beach and doing nothing all week. I try to find somewhere in the middle. My idea of vacation is usually more of the lounging and doing absolutely nothing, not working, not thinking, not using my brain, none of that stuff. Not that there's much brain use going on most of the time anyway, but just got to safeguard that and try to stay ahead of it. But vacations are usually the time that we purposely spend time together, right? I mean, you go on vacation, you're not usually like, well, you guys go do whatever you want, and you guys do whatever you want. We're going to do this together. That's usually the idea of vacation. Last year when we went to Dolphin Island with my dad and his now wife, it was when we did their wedding on the beach there. It was his kids, her kids, all 6 of us together with spouses, with them. I mean, there's 12 or 14 people and 2 dogs. It was a lot of us. And if you've ever tried to do much of anything with 14 people or more, you know it's nearly impossible. For one, not everyone wants to do the same thing, right? We want to go here. Well, we want to go over here. We want to do this. Well, that's cool, but I really don't want to do that. And vice versa. That's how vacations go when you have that many people. And maybe you've done this, and it's a very interesting adventure. But we had multiple days where we did things separate. The day of the wedding is really the only day, I think, that we all actually went out to a single restaurant and ate together. Do you guys know how hard it is to get a table of 15 people? It's fun, isn't it? You're kind of like, well, and they made reservations. They still didn't have our table ready. I think we ended up waiting like half an hour. We all unified in agreeing that we had to wait entirely too long for making a reservation beforehand. But we kind of had this time together, and we also had our time apart. And we did things our way and their way and a little bit of everybody else's way. But vacation is usually a good time of compromise because, you have to agree to do some things. Unfortunately, you don't get to just lounge the entire time. But what we did see is that we would work together and achieve the same goal. The day of the wedding, though, was, like I said, it was the only day I can think of the entire week that we all really unified, worked together, and achieved the same thing. It was like we had one goal that day: do the wedding, take pictures, go eat, celebrate. That was it. The rest of the time, it's like, well, we're going to go. We went to New Orleans one day. We tried to do that together in a couple cars, and that was a mess. If you've ever tried driving down the highway with a group of people, that's a mess. Because some people, I can handle driving behind my dad because I know how he drives, because I pretty much drive identical to him. We're going to pass people. We're probably going to go a little bit above the speed limit. We're just going to keep moving and get over there and get done. My sisters and other people don't necessarily drive that way. They take following literally. We're going to be right behind you and stay there. Like, if you get over, if there's a car next to me or not, I'm getting over too. Like, I'm going to mirror you the entire way. And that's where sometimes there has to be a little bit of correction. Even on vacation, you have to be able to correct someone when they do things that are wrong. And even as adults, I always joke around, man, I mean it still seriously. There's only one man I fear, and that's my dad. Anyone else, I don't care how big you are. I will not mess with my dad then. I know better than that. So there's still a time for correction even in those cases. The last few weeks we've covered the bases in family, right? And I know this is parenting or family advice from a guy who does not have kids. So take it as a grain of salt on those parts, but I do believe that Scripture is accurate and we can use that for raising our kids and being a youth pastor and working with youth and children and teens, and all of those are applicable from the Bible as an example. So week one, what we talked about is what you could do could impact your family forever. Those little sayings that you still say that your parents said when you were a little kid, that's one way they've impacted you. The way I drive was a direct correlation of the way my dad drives. The way Landon drives is probably a direct correlation to the way James drives. There's like, no, not yet. Give him time, he'll get there. It's this growing process sometimes. But we have all these direct influences. The way you watch sports are a direct correlation to your parents. I remember sitting there as a kid, and we're Chiefs fans, so there was a lot of yelling at the TV as a kid because of stupid things that would happen in the games, and just giving games away in playoffs is a very normal thing for us in my life growing up. So I remember my dad yelling at the screen a lot during football, and I'll catch myself and Kristen gets so mad because I'll be yelling at the TV and throwing a remote and stuff like that. So it's like, what are they doing? I learned it from my dad. He'll be listening to this, and he'll probably tell me about this later this week. But he knows I learned it from him. I come by it honestly, and it's just frustrating sometimes. But we pick up good and bad habits from our parents, and even the people that are like parents. You know, I have, when me and Luke and Landon went to Empower, we got done, and Luke's like, you yell a lot during basketball. Yeah, I do. My friend, his dad was the guy that was always yelling. One of our other friends, who was actually there that day, was a ref for us when we played basketball. He went to the same Nazarene church all of us went to. He would be a ref at the games, and this guy who was the associate youth pastor, whose son was playing basketball, would be up there yelling at the ref that he knew to open his eyes and stuff like that. And you could always hear him yelling. I didn't hear anybody else yelling, but I always heard Mike. So it was just that thing. We knew it was going to happen. So I learned it from him, who was like a second dad to me. Last week, we talked about the best discipleship is modeled at home. Discipleship, the way that we spend time in the Bible, the way that we pray, the way that we do much of anything in our life, the way we evangelize, we talk to other people about God, all of those are modeled best at home. We can say a lot of really good things in public, but if you don't have your own disciplines, your own spiritual disciplines, and your own way of living life, your kids, especially more than anyone else, your kids and your spouse will see that, and they'll see through it. That's why the hardest people to ever witness to are your family. Specifically for me, it's usually your siblings, because they're usually pretty quick to point out, well, you did this, this, and this when we were kids, or you remember that time you did this, and it's quick to be pointed out. So the best discipleship is modeled at home, because that's where we can see what our hearts really are. Because in public, we can put on a happy face. We can put on that good face, that good Christian face, and but at home, you are relaxed. You don't let anyone else in, so it's just you. And today, we get to talk about the fun topic of discipline. But the important part is grace-filled discipline is love. It equals love. Because for there to be love, there has to be some correction. I mean, if your parents didn't want you to be a better person, they wouldn't correct you. If God didn't want us to be better people, there'd be no correction. There'd be no need for correction. We could do whatever we want, however we wanted, and it wouldn't make any difference if God didn't want us to be better people. So it takes some correction. It takes some love. But part of that is the grace-filled discipline, because there's two kinds of discipline. We all know both kinds probably. That discipline where I'm going to tell you what you did wrong, and however your version of punishment is, I'm going to tell you what you did wrong and why. Or it's the kind where there's absolutely no rhyme or reason to it, no understanding, but you're going to be disciplined no matter what. You may not have done this. And the perfect example of being disciplined for something you didn't do is when you wake up and your wife hits you because of something you did in your dream. In her dream, sorry. So that is a perfect example of, unwarranted discipline. If you've ever had that happen to you, you understand. I am so mad at you right now. I can't believe you did that. I didn't. It was in your dream. Why were you dreaming I did that? Is there something that you're trying to tell me? That's the real question. Got to make sure you don't turn it around. Just like when you tell someone, just calm down, it'll be fine. That always works, every time. It never does. So there's a correct way to discipline and a wrong way to discipline. I always believe that as a manager, someone that manages restaurants and some of those places, that it's praise in public, discipline in private. You don't stand in front of a bunch of people and say, hey, you messed this up completely, this is why, you're an idiot, and go on, because it's very belittling to people. And if you're like most people, if someone does that to you in public, what do you usually want to do? You don't want to get better. You're kind of like, I don't like this place, I quit, I'm not going to try, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to do it just to make him mad again. These are things people think. And I know that because I've thought a lot of these things myself. So this is speaking from personal experience. But graceful discipline equals love. And that's something we have to understand, especially as we look at the parental role, because a lot of times, and I saw this growing up too, and it's, I don't want them to look at me like a parent, I want them to look at me like a friend. I never heard my parents say that. But my dad is one of my best friends, and I always got along with both of my parents great. But it wasn't just this, we're going to be friends and we're going to hang out and be buddy-buddy. There was a lot of that, and there was a lot of fun, but there was also, hey, you messed up. There's correction that needs to happen. There's discipline. There's consequences. So the key scripture we're looking at today is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 5 through 11. Hebrews is a really good book. I've preached out of Hebrews a few different times from different places. Hebrews is written specifically in the Jewish perspective, which is why it's one of the best books where you can see correction, discipline, and all that, because that is the Jewish understanding. Everything has a consequence. If you read through some of the Levitical law, the laws of Leviticus and Deuteronomy and Numbers and all of those, you'll see that if you do this, this is the consequence. If you read through Psalms, if you read through Proverbs, any of those, you see a lot of correlation between this is what you did, this is the action for it, this is how you did this is what you need to do. It's you messed up, you need to repent and perform this type of sacrifice. So they understood consequence and correction, but as you're trying to lean from that understanding of very Old Testament, very harsh judgment, and also kind of a skewed view of God. Because they believe that they had to be perfect for God to come back. For God to send Jesus, they had to be perfect. And that's why they created even more laws to try to become more perfect. Which doesn't work, just points out more flaws, more ways to fall short. But that's what they tried, so that's what they believed. So they don't really see God as this loving father figure that you have a personal relationship with. They saw God as a person who was kind of distant and stood in his place. I mean, he had a temple, right? God wasn't with everybody. He was in the temple, he was in his tent, and even beyond the temple, he had his own Holy of Holies, is what they called it. It would be the special place that only the priest could go. And it actually got so bad at one point that the priests, when they went in, they would act, because they could only go in once a year, if they weren't perfectly clean, if they weren't holy, they weren't righteous when they went in, bad things could happen to them. So they would actually tie a rope to their ankle and go into the Holy of Holies. So then if they didn't come back out, they could drag them back out. I mean, that was their view of God, was this very unpersonal view. So that's where Paul's explaining this here in Hebrews. And we'll go ahead and start in verse 5. And it says, "And you have forgotten the exhortation which is addressed to you as sons. My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor faint when you are reproved by him. For those whom the Lord loves, he disciplines, and he scourges every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you endure. God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? But if you are without discipline, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate children and not sons." You're not children of God. "Furthermore, we had earthly fathers to discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not much rather be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our good, so that we may share the holiness, his holiness. All discipline for the moment seems not to be joyful but sorrowful, yet to those who have been trained by it, afterwards it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. This is a hard thing for us to grasp and understand, especially verse 11. Because I want to ask just one question. You can raise your hand or not, it's up to you. But who here likes to be corrected or disciplined? Anybody like to be corrected and disciplined? Like, yeah, I love to get spanked as a kid. I look forward to it. You know, I look forward to getting bad grades. I look forward to sitting down with my manager, them telling me, well, you're doing pretty good, but here's where you're messing up. Anybody look forward to those? You're like, yeah, I eat it up. No one looks forward to this. So, and it's very purposeful that he says that it's not to be joyful. It's not a happy moment. You know, you're not like, I'm so excited to be disciplined, but it's sorrowful. But to those who've been trained by it afterwards, I like how he says, just because you've been trained by discipline, it doesn't say during it, you're happy. But afterwards, it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. After you've been disciplined, you've corrected, you've moved forward, it yields the fruit of righteousness. It helps you become better with application. You can be corrected. And I have one of my closest cousins, me and him are great friends. His dad was a pastor, still is a pastor. And that kid got spanked more than any kid I know. And he would say that too, and his dad would say that too. Because he was a little ornery, and still is, really, if you've met him, he still is. But he has been trained. But there's this thing when you get disciplined for something and you do it again, and the punishment's the same, and then you do it again, and the punishment's the same, it kind of feeds this pattern, right? It's not leading to righteousness. So it has to be some application. So the first thing I think I want us to see, or the first thing I think God wants us to see from this, is discipline out of love. Because there's multiple kinds of ways we can discipline. We can discipline out of revenge. We can discipline out of spite. We can discipline out of anger. You know that you hurt me, I'll hurt you kind of discipline, or correction. You know, there's sometimes when you're just around people that just get under your skin really easily. We all have those people. It's not unique to me. It's not unique to you. Just so you know. It's not in any of us individually, but if you've ever talked to teachers, I think they have a better understanding of not disciplining out of, hatred or anger or any of those, because kids do some ornery things. Sometimes it's because they don't know any better. Sometimes it's because of other personal issues that they're crying out for. They're wanting attention, or that's the way they know to do things. As a former youth pastor, driving a youth van, a van full of junior hires, was probably the worst thing I think I ever had to do. Because it's loud, it's obnoxious. Oh, and I always say junior high boys. So it's like 14, 15 junior high, 6th and 7th grade, 8th grade boys filled in a van. You can only imagine all of the things going on, noises and sounds and gases and all the fun stuff that teenage boys are great at. So you have to be careful not to discipline certain ones more than others just because they get under your skin more. Sometimes I think that when we look at kids or parents or relatives, some of the worst things we can ever see in them is ourselves. Because there's nothing that irritates you more than when you see yourself in someone else. That is like, if you ever been told by somebody when you're like, they just do this, and they're like, well, you do that too, right? And you're like, what? And then you actually catch yourself doing the exact same thing that they do that annoys you, and you're like, man, I annoy a lot of people by doing this. We see ourselves in other people, and sometimes we're harder on them because of it. And that could be our kids, that could be our friends' kids, our family, our relatives, our nieces, nephews, all kinds of people that it's like, this is going to be tough for them. But we have to discipline out of love. Because if you're disciplining out of love, for one, they can tell the difference. Correction is better applied when it's received in love. If you've ever told someone something that was kind of like, hey, this was okay, but you could maybe do it better by doing this, the way you say it makes a world of difference. Because if you ever had someone walk up to you, especially if you're a public speaker, don't say pastor, public speaker, so you've ever had someone walk up to you like, yeah, today's sermon is terrible. That's not really going to help. Just going to say that. If you want to tell me it's terrible, feel free to. But, maybe offer like, it was terrible because, and I'll receive it a little better, but if you just leave it, it was terrible. Your driving is terrible. Your clothes are terrible. Your outfit looks hideous. Whatever you're going to say, if you're going to correct someone, first thing is do it out of love. Second thing, maybe give them a reason why. Maybe my sermon's terrible because it really bothered you. Maybe it was terrible because I repeated myself too many times. Maybe it was terrible because I'm an idiot. I mean, you give me some reasons here at least. You're stupid. That's why it was terrible. People will have different reasons why they'll say what they say. But if you discipline out of love, it's easier to be received. Because I think we've all probably been disciplined by someone. That stranger in public that tries to tell you don't do this because of this, or that person that you barely know tries to correct you on something. How far does that go? You're like, meh, I don't know them, and I don't owe them. I don't owe you anything, so I'm not going to listen to what you said, basically. That's something that I think I am personally bad at. If I get an email from someone at work, and if they're not above me, it's like, okay, like, why are you sending me this email telling me I did this? And then, I'll usually spend time and go through a whole report of this is why this was right. Because, some of us like to make sure we're right a lot. And that's me at work. And I try to get better about that. I just send it to other people, like, handle this. But we have habits of receiving and giving discipline outside of love. If someone gives you correction, it's not meant to love. Maybe it's meant to make you worse and not make you better. You have to filter it. Because if you're receiving discipline that's not meant to grow you, to make you stronger, you're receiving discipline that's just tearing you down. So, discipline out of love, receive discipline in love. And that's where we have to know, so how do we make sure we're disciplining out of love? We have to tap into the grace God offers, first and foremost. Because you will not love other people, especially, if most people were totally honest, and I know I've heard stories, but sometimes it's hard to love your own kids. It's even harder to love somebody else's kids probably. It's even harder to love your siblings. It's harder to love those that are around you. When they do things that just get at you. But we have to tap into the grace that God offers us, because His grace will always lead us to love. It will lead us to grace and not spite. It'll lead us to grace and lead us back to God rather than leading us astray. And that's why today's focus is grace-filled discipline equals love. Because we can easily discipline in other areas. Discipline is usually seen as a very negative thing, because a lot of times discipline is, out of anger, it's out of hatred, it's out of so many other things. But grace-filled discipline is where we can show God and His correction to those around us. Now, I will say one place where we have to understand is grace-filled discipline is not the kind of discipline that goes to people that you have no relationship with and tells them why they're doing everything wrong. Because, again, you'll never receive correction from a stranger probably. If you've never met them, you can tell them. If you're telling them with love, you feel God's telling you, hey, I need to tell this person this, tell them. But if it's just one of those things, I'm going to tell them because this bothers me, really check why you're doing it. Is it really going to grow them, or is it going to hurt them? Because retaliation or retribution or any of those things are not discipline. It's a different way to look at it, but it is not discipline. Getting revenge is not discipline. It's not, I'm going to give them correction because I'm going to get back. That's not how that works. Grace-filled correction or discipline equals love. We will not always get it right. It'll never always be right the first time. It's not always going to be perfect the way we do it, but we have to try to do it God's way. The other reason why grace-filled discipline is so important is because discipline teaches righteousness. Discipline teaches righteousness because it teaches us to move forward properly. Because if you don't know what is right and you don't know what is wrong, how do you know what to do? But who when you're driving, if you don't know the speed limit, errs on the side of caution, it's like, well, it's probably this. You ever been totally wrong? Because you're guessing. It's probably this. And then it's like, oh, I'm going 60 and a 35. That's good. We have those moments, though, that we have to know the difference between right and wrong, and discipline teaches us that. When we look at the Bible and we look at Scripture, we look at the things that it gives us, and it tells us. One thing where, as a youth pastor, I learned, and it applies to parents as well, is that if you're going to tell them there's a consequence, you have to follow through. No, you're doing this. If you do it again, I'm going to send you up to your parents. That was what we said as youth pastors, because you can't spank them and you can't put them in a corner. A lot of those things. You can't send them to the senior pastor like you do in school, send you to the principal. And sometimes, if you're like the churches I've been in, the senior pastor is the person that is their kid that you're having problems with, that you need to send. So future children's workers, youth workers, all of that, I'll apologize in advance when that day comes. But, because I know they'll talk plenty. There's no doubt about that. If they're my child, they'll probably talk too much. They'll be in trouble about it. But discipline has a consequence. It's with the consequence. You can't say, if you keep doing this, I'll send you, and then you warn them again. It teaches them that there's no consequence, but it also teaches them that you're a liar. I mean, if we really look at it simply, if you say this is going to happen, it doesn't happen, well, you lied to them, and you don't really want to punish them. One of the things that was most aggravating on the family trip that we were at, with everybody out there, my nephew, who's 7 or 8, he'll be 8 in August, he would be told, if you do this, I'm going to take your iPad away, or I'm going to take this away, and it would never happen. It was just warning after warning. So do you think he kept doing what he was doing? Yeah. No consequence. Consequences to fall through with, and he knew that, so he did whatever he wanted to do. The reason that we have to teach consequences is because everything in life will always have a consequence. If you show up late to work, you'll get in trouble. You show up to school late, you don't do your homework, you'll be in trouble. If you don't show up to work at all, you'll be in trouble. If you're like most companies, if you don't show up to work for 2 or 3 days in a row, you don't have a job anymore, if you make it that far. I know some places where it was a one-day policy. You show up, no call, no show, see ya. There's consequences to everything. So part of the problem with, I will say this, with my generation, is that when consequences aren't followed through with, they believe that they don't have to follow the rules. They don't have to follow the same thing. Well, there's no consequence to it. So when they actually face a consequence for the first time in their life, when they're in college or when they're out of college, it's something new, it's something different, and it's something strange. And that's one of the reasons that generations that are older than millennials have always complained about millennials. And as my dad would say, the truth is, it's probably your generation's fault that we act the way we do. Because someone had to raise us. Someone had to teach us. Someone had to give us correction and consequence. And this isn't a thing that's going to say about how you should punish, how you should discipline, how you should do that. It's just doing what you say you'll do. If you say, I'll take it away, and they do it again, you take it away. If it's, you're going to be grounded for a week, they're grounded for a week. It's just following through with it. Because one of the greatest areas that we'll see discipline and we'll see correction is with our Christian life. Because God corrects us. The Holy Spirit corrects us and prompts us, and you feel that voice telling you, don't do this, or do this, or you need to do this. Correction is there. Discipline is there. But God corrects us, our parents correct us, the people around us correct us, and we correct our children out of love. If there's no correction, there's no hope. Because I think that Jesus proved that himself. He took on all sin for all of humanity, which would be our correction, our punishment. He bore that, took that on himself for us. It wasn't that he took it and was like, oh, we'll see, like, I'm going to do this kind of, but I'm not really going to do this. Like, if he would have been on the cross and he would have called angels down like he was on the cross, he would not have followed through with what he was supposed to do. It would not have been finished. It would have been partially there, but it would not have been all the way there. Jesus bore that for us, that consequence, that sin for us. And that's how we know where God gives correction. Because if God will put that punishment that was deserved for us on his son, then we know that there's correction that we should receive too. There's punishment that we should receive, and sometimes it's going to God and repenting, allowing him to take it, but there's still consequences for our actions. Just because you repent doesn't mean that everything that happened around you is gone away completely. Sometimes it takes years for those consequences to come back, but it's the way we react to it. Move forward. I've seen God do miraculous things through things when we turn it over to him. When we give it to him and just, this is what's going to happen. This is what you deserve, and this is the punishment that you earned, and then it's completely different. Ask if everyone will stand with me as the worship team comes up. This morning, as you're